we just got what's probably the most concrete leak on the Insta360 X6 so far. And this time, it's not a render or a blurry spy shot. It's the actual camera and the whole retail box, front and back, fully readable. This was shared by the new camera just a few hours ago, and it might honestly be more useful than any of the design leaks we've seen until now, since it basically confirms a good chunk of what we could only guess before. If you've been following the channel, you already know we've covered the X6 quite a few times now, from the very first design leak to the specs and even the price. I'll leave those videos linked at the top right corner of the screen if you want the full picture. But for now, let's get straight into what's new. So, starting with the front of the box, as you can see, it clearly reads Insta360 X6 8K 360 camera. Right below that, it says Essentials Bundle. It's the more complete version, the same one we already talked about pricing for in a previous video. Now let's flip it over because the back is where things actually get interesting. The full in-the-box list is now confirmed, and it includes the Insta360 X6 camera itself, an extra extreme battery, a 114cm invisible selfie stick, a lens cap, a charge case, a USB-C cable, a protective pouch, and a lens cloth. Most of that lines up with what we'd expect from an Essentials bundle. We already saw a very similar list with the X5, but the one thing that stands out to me here is the extra extreme battery and the new charging case, as you can see here. There are a couple more small details on the box worth mentioning. First, there's a Dolby Vision logo printed directly on the packaging, which lines up with what WinFuture already reported a couple weeks ago about the X6 supporting 10-bit, Dolby Vision, and iLog formats. So that's confirmed. Second, the box lists the official SKU as X605, which is a small detail, but it's the kind of thing that usually gets used later to cross-reference retailer listings and pricing databases, so it's actually pretty useful going forward. And finally, the US entity listed on the box is Arashi Vision US LLC, based in Irvine, California, which is Insta360's American branch. So nothing groundbreaking there, but it does confirm this is meant for a proper US retail release and not just a regional launch. Now, if you remember from my earlier videos, we already had a pretty solid idea of what the X6 looks like and what it can do. So let's do a quick recap before we get to the price and the final release date, since that's really the last piece of the puzzle here. The X6 completely changes the design language Insta360 has used since the very first Insta1X. It drops that tall rectangular shape for something much more compact and closer to the Osmo 360 or the GoPro Max, as you can see from this image, which makes it noticeably easier to mount and better balanced. The screen got smaller as a trade-off, and it now relies on digital buttons for things like starting a recording or switching lenses. But Insta360 still added dedicated physical buttons on the side for power and recording, which weren't there on the X5. The microphone count also went up significantly, with mics placed above the screen, below the lens, and on both sides of the body. On the camera side, as I mentioned, we're looking at dual 42-megapixel sensors at 1/1.1 inches, recording 8K at 50 frames per second and shooting 120-megapixel 360 photos, which is a clear jump from the X5's 1/1.3 inches sensors that topped out at 30 frames per second in 8K. In single lens mode, the X6 can reportedly hit 5K at 60 frames per second and even 4K at 120 frames per second. And it can also do 8K slow motion at 25 frames per second, which is honestly a pretty wide spread of options for a single camera. Battery life was actually expected to improve, but actually, in 8K 30 frames per second, it reaches 140 minutes, as you can see on the box. So let's talk about the release date, because this is where the new leak actually gives us something fresh. There was a photo that surfaced on Reddit recently of what looks like a real production unit, and it hinted at a possible July 30th release, which would be incredibly soon. But honestly, based on how Insta360 has handled previous launches after FCC clearance, and looking at most other sources, I'd still lean towards a late August or early September window being more realistic.
That said, the fact that we're already seeing finished retail packaging with the extended warranty printed on it does suggest the X6 is genuinely in its final stages before launch, so it might not be that far off either way. As for the price, this new leak doesn't really change much from what we already knew. European retailer listings are still placing this essentials bundle at around €789, which is roughly $860 to $870. And that lines up almost exactly with the €800 figure WinFuture reported a few weeks back. There's still no official US pricing, but if the conversion holds, we're probably looking at something in that same range once it actually launches there. Now, to put that into perspective again, let's go back to the competition, because the price is still the biggest question mark around this camera in my opinion. The GoPro Max 2 remains the cheapest entry point into this category by a good margin. And even though the X6 clearly wins on raw specs, with better sensors, higher frame rates, and more recording flexibility, that gap in price is still nearly €200. Then there's the DJI Osmo 360 Mark II, which we've also covered recently. And that one's actually the more interesting comparison, since it's now matching the X6 on frame rate with 8K at 60 frames per second. And it's rumored to be getting replaceable lenses too, all while reportedly staying closer to €500. If that price holds, DJI would be undercutting the X6 by almost €200 while still competing on paper, which is a pretty significant gap to justify.
But price isn't the only thing that matters here. The release timing is honestly just as important, but the deal breaker for many will be availability. As we've just seen, the X6 is realistically only a few weeks away at this point. We're looking at that late August to early September window, if not even earlier than that. The Osmo 360 Mark II, on the other hand, is still very much in testing. We've seen prototypes caught alongside the original unit and warehouse shots of the replaceable lens kits, but nothing anywhere near a retail box yet. And there's another thing to take into account. Remember the Osmo Pocket 4P? It's been in that coming soon page on DJI's website since April 2026. It took them almost 4 months to release it outside of China, and it won't even come to the United States. Now, the FCC seems to have fixed the loophole DJI had figured out with the XTRA products. So the Insta360 X6 will likely be the one and only option besides the GoPro Max 2 for the US. And that's not great if you look at the price difference, which makes the Osmo the clear winner in terms of value for money. So in my opinion, the X6 is shaping up to be an excellent camera on paper, probably the most capable one Insta360 has ever put out. But they're really going to have to justify that price difference once it's actually out, especially with DJI closing the gap this fast. We'll obviously know a lot more once we get closer to that release window, so make sure you're subscribed to not miss any new update through the channel's posts. And drop a like if this video was helpful.